Let's start with the arithmetic operators. We already used the basic arithmetic operators like plus, minus, multiplication, division, but there are more arithmetic operators than these. For example, we have the modulo operator, which is the percentage sign, and this operator basically gives you the remainder after the division. For example, if we do 10 modulo 3, we will get 1. Since 10 equals to 3 times 3 plus 1, this 1 is the remainder after the division, and that is why we get 1 here in the console. For example, if we do 10 modulo 2, we should get 0 in the console, and that is because 10 equals to 2 times 5 plus 0, and this 0 is the remainder that we get in the console. The next arithmetic operator is the exponential, which is two multiplication icons together. For example, if we want to calculate the 2 powered by 2, which equals to 2 times 2, we can use this exponential operator. Or if we want to calculate 2 powered by 3, which equals to 2 times 2 times 2, we can use this exponential operator in this case. If I do 2 exponential operator and then 3, this is the equivalent of 2 powered by 3, and you can see that in the console we are getting 8. And we also have the increment operator, which is two pluses near each other. For example, let's say we have a variable called x and we store 2 inside of this x. Now if you want to add 1 to this x, we can do x equals to x plus 1, and now we will have 3 stored inside of x. But there is an easier way to do this. Instead of doing x plus 1, we can do x plus plus, and this basically adds 1 to x. And now if we console x, you can see that we have 4 stored inside of this x variable. And similar to increment, we also have the decrement operator, which is two minuses together. For example, now if you want to decrement 1 from x, you can do x equals to x minus 1. And now you will have 3 stored inside of x. But an easier way to do this, you can basically do x minus minus. And now if you log the x, you can see that we have 2 stored inside of x because we subtracted 1 from this 3. And these are all of the arithmetic operators that you need to know. I would say the most used ones are these basic operators, and then we also use the increment and decrement in for loops, which you will see in the next section. But it's good to know all of them because you might also need to use this exponential or modulo sometimes in your code. And this should be modulo, not module, so this is just a typo. Now let's move on to the next type of operators, which is comparison operators. We already used one of them, which is strict equality. For example, if we want to check if 2 equals to 2, we use this strict equality and then we get the result in the console, which is either true or false. For example, if I check 2 strict equals to 3, we should get false in the console because 2 is not equal to 3. Strict equality also checks for the type of these variables, not only the values. For example, if I do 2 equals to 2 string, and the result of this will be false because this is the number 2, and on the other hand this is the text 2, and these are not equal to each other because they have different types. But on the other hand we have loose equality, which is 2 equal signs instead of 3, and this operator checks if two values are equal after converting them to a common type. For example, if we do 2 equals to 2 text, you will see that we get true in the console, and that is because this loose equality converts them to the same type. So this operation is the equivalent of 2 strict equals to 2 because it converts this second string to 2 number and then does the comparison, and that's why we get true in the console. But in most cases, this is not the recommended way in JavaScript to compare numbers or anything. If you want to compare two variables in JavaScript that don't have the same type, you better convert one of them to the same type and then use the strict equality here instead of using this loose equality. And this will help you avoid unexpected results when comparing values of different types. Similar to equality operators, we also have the inequality operators, which is written like this. For example, if we define a variable called x and assign value 3 to it, and for instance, if we want to check if this x is not equal to 2, we can use this inequality operator, and now we will get true in the console because x is equal to 3 and it's not equal to 2, and that's why we get true in the console. Next we have greater than operator, which is written like this. For instance, we can check if x is greater than 1, you can see it's true, and if we check x is greater than 4, you can see it's false because x equals to 3 and it's not more than 4. And similar to that, we have less than operator, which is written like this. We can check if x is less than 1, which is obviously false, or we can check if x is less than 4, which is true because 3 is less than 4. And lastly, we have greater than or equal, which is written like this. For instance, if we do 3 is greater than 3, we will get false because 3 is not greater than 3, but they are equal. So if we compare 3 is greater than or equal to 3, in this case we will get true because we are also checking if they are equal, and in this case they are. That's why we get true in the console. And the last one is less than or equal, which is the same as greater than equal, but with the opposite sign. For example, 4 is less than 4 is false, but if we do 4 is less than or equal to 4, now we will get true in the console. And these are all of the comparison operators that you need to know in JavaScript. Now let's move to the third group of the operators, which are the assignment operators. Assignment operators basically combine an arithmetic operation with assignment. For example, if we declare a variable called a and we assign 1 to it, let's say we want to add 5 to this a, we can do a equals to a plus 5, and after this operation the value of a will be 6. But there is a shorter way to do this with assignment operators. For example, we can do a plus equals to 5, and this basically is the same as writing this. So in this case we add 5 to a, and since the value of a is currently 6, this basically means 6 plus 5, which will be 11. So now we will have 11 stored inside of a variable. And we have similar shortcuts for subtraction, we have similar shortcuts for multiplication and also for division. We also have the shortcut for modulo and also for the exponential. And these are all of the assignment operators. Now let's move on to logical operators. First we have the logical AND operator, or it is more common to write it like this. Let's say we want to check two conditions at the same time. Let's first declare two variables. Let's set the value of a to be 1 and let's set the value of b to be 2. Let's say we want to do two operations at the same time. Let's say we want to check if the value of a equals to 1 and also the value of b is equal to 2. We can use this AND operator here to combine both of these together. And basically this means that if both operators on the left and right side are true, only then we will get true. For example, if one of these operations is false, let's say we are checking if a equals to 2 and b equals to 2. Now we will get false in the console because this first part of our operation is false, and no matter what comes after this result will be false because we are checking with AND operator. Another logical operator is the or it's more usual to write it like this. For example, if we do this same operation here but with OR operator, this will check if the left operator is true, and if it is not, then it will check if the right operator is true. And this results in true if at least one of these operations are true. In this example, it first checks if a equals to 2, which is false. Then it moves to the next part of the comparison, which is if b equals to 2. And the result of this is true because we have b equals to 2 here. That's why we get true in the console. And the last logical operator is the NOT operator, which is written like this. This basically reverses the operation. For example, if we do not true, this will result in false, and if we do not false, this will result in true. And one more thing to know about logical operators is they are not always providing us true or false values. For example, if we do true and false, here obviously we will get false because one of these is not true, and that is the second part of the operation. But this doesn't mean that logical operators always return true or false. Let me show you one useful example. Let's say we have let user variable, which should hold the value of user details, and for now this is undefined, meaning we don't have the user details yet. And then we have another variable which is default user, and in case this user is not defined, we assign some default user to this. Let's say we set it to guest. So in case user provided their name, we can call them with their name, but if they didn't provide it, then we want to call them with guest name. So let's say we want to create another variable which is based on these two values, which is called display name. And we want to assign this to the username if it was provided, and otherwise we want to assign it to guest name. Now we can do this with if-else statements. We can do if user, and in this case we set the display name to be equal to user, and then we can do else, meaning that the username was not provided. In this case we can set the display name to be equal to default user. And if we hit enter, you can see that now we stored guest inside of display name instead of the user because they didn't provide us with their username. But most often we can use logical operators to shorten our code. For example, now we can use logical operator or instead of doing all of these if-else statements. We can assign the display name variable to user or default user. And this means that we want to use this default user in case the username was not provided, and in case this was provided, we won't continue the rest of the operation and we will assign display name to user. And this basically results in the same thing as we have above, but you can see that the code is much shorter than this code. And let's summarize with the last operator type, which is the ternary operator. The ternary operator is a shortened way to write if-else statements in a single line. Let's say we have the same scenario where we have username and then default user. And now if the username was provided, we want to call them with their name, and otherwise we want to call them as guest. We can also use ternary operators here to shorten our code. And to shorten this, we can use this condition here. So we do user and then question mark. And after the question mark comes the code which will be executed if this is true, which is this part. So we will set display name to user. And after this sign comes the second part, which will be executed if the user is false. And in our case, it is the default username. Let's go through this again. We assign display name to either user or default user, and that is based in if the username was provided or not. So if the username is undefined, which is in our case, this will mean that this is not true, so we won't execute this part of code. In this case, it will be assigned to default user, which is guest. And in case this was true, let's say we had some username like John assigned here. In that case, we will execute this part of code and we will ignore this second part. If we hit enter, you can see that this display name is get set to guest, and that's because we don't have the username defined, it is undefined, and that's why we set it to default username, which is guest.